Hi there everybody, we are going to look at trigonometry. Now if you've never looked at trigonometry before, then you need to probably start from here. Alright, trigonometry is in relation to calculating some information from a right angle triangle if you have things missing. Alright, so the first thing you need to be aware of is you need to know the different names of the sides of the triangle. Alright, that's quite important because ultimately there are three ways of achieving what we're about to do, and without knowing the names of the sides of the triangle you're going to find that quite a challenge. All right, so here is a right angle triangle, and what we have, there's the right angle, and I'm going to basically introduce you to the names of the sides in case you didn't know them. So this one over here, okay, the longest side of a right angle triangle, and it's always opposite the right angle, is called the hypotenuse. All right, so the longest side opposite the right angle is a hypotenuse. So let's put it on there. All right, so that is the most important one. All right, the next two are in relation to the angle itself here. All right, you'll notice we haven't put an angle up here because it really depends on what we're trying to calculate or where we currently are as to how we label the next two. Right, so this one over here is the angle we're referring to. So because of that, if I draw a line over here, that means this one over here is the opposite. All right, but since it's going to put there as the adjacent, well, this one is the adjacent. All right, so this one, I would normally go for this one first, but this one at the bottom is the adjacent. So the side next to the angle between the right angle, so in between these two, is the adjacent. And then I was about to say this one over here is the opposite. All right, so I'll go for the opposite. All right, so just to kind of recap, hypotenuse is the longest, the opposite is the one that's opposite the angle, and then the adjacent is the one in between the two angles we're talking about, so in between the right angle and that angle. All right, so that's how they're labelled. And of course, that H, O, and A, that hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite, you're going to come across an awful lot more in the next few minutes. Okay, so they are the sides of the triangle. Right, so sine, cosine, and tangent are the three ratios in terms of the size, or so functions that you we're going to come across in relation to calculating a triangle. I'm trying not to use loads of fancy words, but ultimately you're going to see these on your calculator as sin, cos, and tan. They're going to be abbreviated. All right, so they are functions often referred to as sin, cos, and tan, which give the ratios between two sides. All right, it's literally what I'm trying to say. Okay, so you need to put the angle into the function to get the ratio out, and the functions are as follows. All right, so you might want to make a note of these ones because they're going to come across an awful lot, basically. So sin x, okay, so sin, the function of sin x is equal to the opposite divided by hypotenuse. All right, cos x is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And again, you don't really need to worry about sin and cos and what they're called, but what you do need to remember is how they relate to each other. So sin is opposite of hypotenuse, cos is adjacent of hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent. All right, so they're your combinations. You've got O and H, A and H, and O and A. Okay, sin, cos, and tan. All right, and you need to learn those. All right, so your job is obviously try and remember these. You'll hear this an awful lot if you look on the internet, and there's lots and lots of mnemonics out there in terms of how to remember with certain words. But this is SOHCAHTOA. All right, so it's an abbreviation word. So you've got sin, opposite and hypotenuse, cos, adjacent and hypotenuse, and tan, opposite and adjacent. All right, so over the next however long you need, please try and make sure you try and remember those. Okay, so SOHCAHTOA. So to find the size of x, do you need to use sin, cos, or tan? All right, so this is the first question. Do you need to work out sin, cos, or tan? So looking at the two sides that you've got, we've got to identify what you've got. Well, this one over here is the opposite, and this one over here is the hypotenuse. So which one has opposite and hypotenuse in? Well, if we're going to calculate, we're not at this point, then I'd use this one because this has opposite and hypotenuse in, so I'm going to use sin. Okay, so labeling the two sides, and I'm going to use sin to find x. All right, so that's sine, cos, and a tangent. All right. So how do we go about finding a side? Actually, how do we kind of apply those kind of formulas? All right, so you're going to have your calculator to hand, hopefully. If you're not, go grab it or come back to it and look at it again. But to find a side, you need to have obviously a bunch of information, and then you need to be able to identify if it's sin, cos, or tan. That's going to be your first step. And then from there, you're going to apply the formulas that I provided you a minute ago. And that might take a bit of time for you to get used to, but I'm sure you will. So identify which function to use. So We've got two sides involved. We've got this one and this one. We're not bothered about this one. All right, I know some people say, well, what about that one? Well, if you ask you the question, then we'll try and figure it out. But it's not. It wants to know this one and this one. This one we've got, this is the one we're interested in. So this one here is the adjacent, and that one there is the hypotenuse. All right, so you're going to have one, because we're trying to find a side, I need to use that side in part of my calculation, and then I need the other two pieces of information, which is the side, hypotenuse, and then the angle, of course. All right, so now you're going to put those into the one that's most appropriate, which is cos, because that cos has adjacent and hypotenuse in it. When I put the numbers in, you'll see what happens. You've got cos 30, that's the angle, is equal to b over 9. All right, and that is relatively straightforward in terms of rearranging it, in terms of how we do, because this is divided by 9, and then I just do the inverse, so the cos 30 and times it by 9. So I'm doing 9 times cos 30 equals b. Now, this is just something I would just put now straight into my calculator. All right, so in your calculator, please put 9 times cos 30, right, in a bracket, press equals, and it's going to give you 7.79, and that is your solution. All right, if you've not got that, then you need to check your functions of your calculator and make sure they're working okay, and making sure you have a D at the top, which represents your working in degrees. All right, if obviously you have any problems with that, then obviously speak to somebody else, get out your instruction manual, and make sure you are getting that solution. All right, let's have another look at another one. All right, so here we've got a slightly different way of looking at it because we've got the angle at the top. We still need to identify the sides. So if I kind of focus on what I've currently got, so this is 65, so this one is the opposite, and this one is the adjacent. All right, so they're the two that I'm concentrating on. So I've got opposite and adjacent, so which one is that one? If you know, yep, it's going to be tan. Okay, so we just now need to put the numbers into this formula. So what we've got tan 65. All right, so tan 65 is equal to opposite over adjacent, so 7 over y. And now we probably need to, we need to rearrange this. This is why we're doing an example on it, because we've got the y that we want at the bottom, so we need to rearrange it. So the y is going to come to the top, and the tan 65 is going to come to the bottom. All right, so rearranging that one. So y equals 7 over tan 65. Okay, so putting that into my calculator, I've got 3.26 to 2 decimal places. All right, so that's how you go about finding a side. Now, I would probably suggest that you probably need a bit of practice on doing those. So please go to maths-school.co.uk. Obviously, there's a bunch of questions for you to kind of practice and obviously test your understanding. But of course, please feel free to come back to the video at any time. All right, thanks for listening.